Hey everybody, welcome to Common Censored, episode 186, motherfuckers. This is the show where we talk censored stories and people, sensible solutions and common ground movements to fight and build.
And sometimes other stuff.
And that was Eleanor Goldfield. I am Lee Camp. Thanks for being here, folks. I thought we'd start off with a quick commentary. I don't need to dig into all the details, but a quick commentary on
how much you love curling.
How much I love curling. Oh, that reminds me. Curling's going on, isn't it? I haven't seen any of the U.S. I haven't seen any of the Olympics, and so that means I'm missing the curling. Shit. But anyway, the anti-China propaganda rhetoric going on during these Olympics is pretty hilarious, and I haven't been watching it yet, much of the Olympics, but I have heard clips or seen clips of they're like interrupting footage of the Olympics or the opening ceremony on NBC, etc., to like play like 3 or 5 minute interludes
about how horrible China is.
About China's awful human rights abuses, genocide against the Uyghurs, which for some reason no one can point to any evidence of. And it's hilarious because it's like, imagine if the coverage of the Olympics in the U.S. had the same stuff. Like, you know, because the Olympics has been in the U.S. many times, Salt Lake City, L.A., etc., Atlanta. There was one in upstate New York. Where the hell was that one? But could you imagine if just like every 10 minutes they're like, and now let's take a break to show you the genocide of the Native Americans. And now let's take a moment to remind you that black people are still treated like shit in a lot of the country. And now let's pause to show you how the Native Americans are still treated today.
The only difference, of course, being that information you could easily point to proof of,
right.
as opposed to the anti-China propaganda where it's just like, because we said so.
Right.
Back to you, Bob.
And they were pointing to the fact there was a Uyghur athlete that won like one of the medals or maybe a gold medal or something. And a lot of the news sources were pointing to the fact, oh, well, China put that athlete in there as a token to show that they don't discriminate against Uyghurs. And it's like, so basically, if there's Uyghurs in the games, it's
right.
anti-Uyghur, and if there's not Uyghurs in the games, it would also be anti-Uyghur. Oh, China didn't allow any Uyghurs in the games. So I think this is the classic lose-lose situation.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
But it's just like classic garbage like that. Of course, even though tennis isn't in the Winter Olympics, although tennis on ice would be amazing. Can we all agree on that? They're still talking about...
I feel like a lot of things on ice would be great.
Oh, yeah. Just everything on ice. They're still talking about the Chinese tennis player, Peng Shuai, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. She was like 35 in the world or 30 in the world and somewhere in there, top 30, top 20. But she... there's been the ongoing... propaganda that she posted that she was sexually assaulted by someone higher up in the Communist Party in China and had then been disappeared. But if you actually read her post, which she deleted, there's no accusation of sexual assault. There is an accusation of, we had a consensual affair and you broke my heart, which, I'm sorry if people don't like that there are affairs in the world, that people have affairs, whatever. But it's just hilarious that they, like, literally, they're still going, well, the tennis player posted about she was sexually assaulted, and then she's been disappeared. Of course, she hasn't been disappeared. You can find posts from her current present day. And furthermore, if you actually read the translation of her Instagram post, she never says she was sexually assaulted. But that doesn't matter because, facts don't matter anymore. Reality doesn't matter anymore.
Well, of course not when you're pushing for another Cold War, and not to mention that you're pushing for war with China and Russia at the same time, which is really like you're outdoing yourself.
Well, when you're a collapsing empire, you really got to swing at all the things that are encroaching on your empire.
By not encroaching at all.
Well, no, they're economically encroaching, not encroaching by taking land.
Physically encroaching.
Yeah, not physically. Even though we act like Russia's invading everywhere, they have I think, 18 military bases outside of Russia, mostly in the former Soviet bloc, and the U.S. has 900, and China, I think, has one outside of China. Anyway, one last thing I want to note, and this was a great point made by Brian Becker on the Socialist Program, which is a podcast. They're claiming, a lot of countries have diplomatically boycotted the Olympics. So it makes you, if you listen to these reports, people are walking away thinking a lot of countries are not showing up to these games. And obviously, if that were the case, then you couldn't have legit games because the countries aren't showing up. But in fact, A, more countries than ever before are in the Winter Olympics. B, no countries have actually boycotted this Olympic Games because of China. There are something like 19 countries have diplomatically boycotted, meaning their diplomats didn't show up, which is not boycotting the games. It's just being a dick. And of those, like, several that have done that, there were also many of those did it because of COVID. They were like, this country or that country, their diplomats are not showing up because of COVID protocols. So it's not actually 19. It's more countries than ever before participating in this Olympics, and we're acting like it's not legit.
Yeah, well, that's why alternative media is so important.
Yeah, #facts. All right, let's move it along.
Okay, well, this is just a little quick update because this is yet another thing that you won't hear in corporate media is about workers organizing and unionizing. And, this continues to happen across the nation. The past few years, we've seen more wildcat strikes. You talked about this on your show, Redacted Tonight, Lee. We've seen more wildcat strikes in the past few years than we have, in the past, 30 or 40 or even 50 years.
Yep.
So this is really inspiring, and it's important to keep reminding folks that this happens and that workplace organizing is one of the most powerful ways that we can organize. The beast of capitalism cannot march forward without our labor. So I just wanted to share with you that Starbucks workers are organizing. And this has been kind of like a domino effect across the country. And actually, Decolonial Atlas on Instagram put up a map so that you can see where workers are organizing in Starbucks locations across the country, from Buffalo, New York, to Mesa, Arizona, Denver, Colorado, Milwaukee, Baltimore, Tallahassee, et cetera, et cetera. But it's super heartening to see this kind of action happening because, of course, Starbucks, along with some other companies, just recently announced that they're going to be raising their prices despite the fact that they had made more profits this past year than ever before.
Well, and they're also...
But they're like, we got to raise prices.
And a lot of them are claiming inflation, but they're raising it by 5 times what inflation is. So they're like, oh, it's inflation. That's what it is. Like, no, you just fucking want more money.
No, it's greed. And at the same time, you're making more money and none of that money can find its way into the paychecks of the poorest workers in the nation.
And I know some people who work at Starbucks, and the couple of times I've seen them since the pandemic started, they say that it's like horrible. It's horribly worse than it was before.
Mm-hmm.
Like during the pandemic, they have decreased the number of staff workers because they don't want so many people in there to spread and stuff like that, and yet not decrease the hours or anything. So they're just putting double the work on the people that were there. It's just like, oh yeah, we're in tough times, so just fuck you. Let's
no
just
hazard
put it all on you.
pay,
Yeah,
no
of course not.
time and a half, none of that
not.
shit.
I think they get a free spinach frittata. That's it. Per month.
At the end of the day, when it's all crusty and dried and gross.
You get a free display frittata. The one that was sitting in the box out front.
Getting breathed on by people.
2 flies mated on it. That's the one you get.
Fuck yeah, and solidarity to all of the Starbucks workers who are unionizing and organizing in their workspaces. And wherever you work, wherever you are.
By organizing, you mean Post-it notes and staples and stuff?
Mostly paper clips.
Yeah, paper clips.
Actually, those cute little clips that come in different colors, kind of those are so cute.
That makes back to school time fun.
Okay, but little slight tangent. That used to be like my favorite part of going back to school was going to Office Depot and like picking out all of like the colored tabs and shit. That made my OCD very happy.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was like, wow, if I have these subjects I despise well organized, this will be fun. And it didn't end up being fun, but I convinced myself that it was going to be all
And
right.
I still ended up with a bunch of like random ass papers in my backpack, but it started off with good intentions.
If I get different color paper clips with these little stars on them, then I won't notice that the 6'4" guy in 6th grade called me gay and punched me in the back of the head. I won't notice that at all.
Because you will have sparkle taps. So just keep in mind that workplace organizing is one of the most powerful ways that we can organize by withholding our labor. Speaking of withholding labor, when you shouldn't, this actually just this came out recently, and I wanted to share it because I think it's such a like a chef's kiss example of the literal and figurative rot of celebrity culture as it ties into capitalism. And so this recently just came out in The Guardian, and it's titled "Mold Leaks Rot: How Brad Pitt's Post-Katrina Housing Project Went Horribly Wrong." So rewind back to 2005, Hurricane Katrina absolutely fucking decimated.
And I don't know if everyone recalls, but the U.S. government, federal government, dealt with it wonderfully. Just was down there the next day, fixed everything, took care of everyone. It was a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah. By that he means the opposite. So so basically, and I think one of the best pieces that's been written about the grassroots response to this is Scott Crow's book, Black Flags and Windmills.
Yeah, dude, I learned a lot from that book.
Yeah, it's a wonderful book that really highlights how organizing on the ground not only combated the lack of materials and food and medical supplies that folks needed, not only combated the lack of that, but combated white supremacists in and out of uniform, and also combated the dumb shittery of the system. Not only things like FEMA, but also the Red Cross, who, for instance, at one point just showed up with a truckload of plastic forks.
Oh, that was one of my favorite antidotes was that the Red Cross, they didn't just show up with that. They had advertised for days. They had been around the community. You got to picture, these are people who have nothing. They don't have medical care. They don't have electricity. And so there's like pamphlets being handed out saying Red Cross is coming on this, on this day at this time. And then everyone gets in line. There's like a line around the block. And the trucks arrive and they open them up. And it's like plastic forks and napkins.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And people are like, I thought we were going to like get medical care. And they're
food.
like, have extra napkins. If you, how's that help my diabetes? Do you have insulin? Just stuff napkins in it. Napkins will fix it.
But anyway, so Hurricane Katrina absolutely decimated New Orleans, and so the grassroots response was vital to supporting folks. But then you also had, because again, as we noted, the government did fuck all. You had celebrities like Brad Pitt, and like Ellen DeGeneres had a star-studded gala raising money.
She's friends with George Bush. I don't know if you know that.
Right, and so that became like a. And Sean Penn like went down to fuck it. It became like a.
So I don't know if I can blame. There's a lot about Sean Penn I fucking hate. He honestly was certain that if Hillary Clinton had run with John Kasich, a Republican, then she would have won and all would have been fixed in the world. And I'm like, you are a fucking moron. But in that moment, when he ran down there and whatever, got on a boat and tried to save people. It was kind of like, it may have been dumb, but it was kind of like, I wish I had the resources to also do that. Like, just show up. And I don't know that he's helped anything, but just show up with a boat. I mean, Scott Crow did some of this too. You just show up and fucking try and help people. Because that's how you feel. You just want to do that. So, I don't know if I can blame him for that moment. He's done other shit where you're like, dude, you're not helping. You're not helping at all.
Well, to be fair, I don't actually know much about what Sean Penn did. I kind of doubt that it's comparable to what Scott Crow did, but
No, I didn't mean they did equal amounts. Sean Penn was there for like a day.
Okay. Well, see, and this is the other problem with the celebrity, the star-studded white saviorism, the star-studded, disaster relief that happened after Katrina and that happened after, other hurricanes and things like that and earthquakes, is that it throws the focus off of the actual disaster and onto, oh my God, it's Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. But
Well,
so
most
what
of the time
happened?
they don't want to get into the community and actually figure out what needs to be done.
Well, right. And now finally coming to the point of this story.
Sorry.
Get beat around this fucking bush for the rest of my life. So basically what happened is that Brad Pitt decided that a good way to help was to build, not him personally, but have constructed a bunch of houses that were, eco-friendly. They were green. They had like solar panels and shit, and they were, designed by other celebrity architects and shit. And the company that spearheaded this was a nonprofit called Make It Right, and it was launched by Brad Pitt. And, it was just like a mess of celebrities from Snoop Dogg to Bill Clinton who were raising millions of dollars to get these houses built.
And they brought a bunch of volunteers down as well who also worked on these houses.
Right. And basically the idea was that they were going to be, done. These houses were going to be cutting edge, but they were going to be built for, almost like less than cost, right? Like these amazing homes that should be worth millions that are only being, 150 grand or something like that. So that all sounds great, right? And fast forward, not even to today, but like 10 years later, 2015, and there are just... And this actually, 2015 is when this first started to come out. But it turns out that really almost as soon as the cameras left, which how many times have you heard that fucking sentence, shit started to go awry. So the homes, it turns out, were constructed, I don't know, by two blind drunk guys? I don't know. But there were serious defects.
Probably by a lot of volunteers with zero, construction experience, which is a lovely thing. The volunteers want to help, but it doesn't mean they know and have the ability to do it.
There is a picture of Bill Clinton holding a hammer, so
upside down. He's holding the wrong end. But that's the thing.
He's the wrong end.
It's not that the volunteers are in the wrong. They were like, I want to help people, and they go down there, and they often, I assume, aren't getting paid in any way. And they're there to help. But that doesn't mean they're capable of building a nice house.
Well, and to be fair, there might very well have been, very qualified, architects and builders there, but these houses don't reflect that. So everything from water intrusion, black mold, porches rotted through, stair rails collapsing, fires caused by electrical problems, plumbing problems, and poor ventilation. And several have reported termite infestations, and multiple residents of these homes have fallen sick. By the way, these homes were in the lower Ninth Ward, which it was one of the most heavily flooded and decimated areas of New Orleans. And guess what? Predominantly black. So there were just a shit ton of problems with these homes. And so, of course...
And all the wallpaper was just ads for The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. So that was obnoxious.
And so, of course, the residents were like, "Hey, maybe we could get some help in fixing these problems." And ironically, the organization, the company that built these homes, Make It Right, the Make It Right Foundation, just basically ghosted them. And these problems started to pop up, like I said, pretty much as soon as the cameras left. And then by 2014, this report states the buildings were actively falling apart, with reports the glass-infused wood was rotting from the inside out. So, and oh, by the way, there's just other little tidbits that just make you go, like they didn't use waterproof paint. in New Orleans, which if you've ever been there, it is always humid there. Like there's
always
always
wet,
a
yeah.
shit ton of water in the
Yep.
air. So if your house is not waterproofed, if it doesn't have any kind of protection against the elements, that shit's gonna rot in like a day. I mean, New Orleans is literally a swamp, right? And it continues to recede into the ocean thanks to climate change. So basically, what happened is that this foundation, Make It Right, initially made some like minor repairs just to like save face. But then they just basically ghosted people, and those they didn't ghost, they pushed them to sign non-disclosure agreements before they'd tell them what was wrong, because they're like, look, we don't want this getting out because it's going to make Brad Pitt look bad. And then it basically turned into a total ghosting project. And the person who wrote this article says that, you know, the website stopped updating. It was later replaced by a blank page. The office stopped picking up the phone. Basically, everybody involved with Make It Right has disappeared. And nobody can find them. There's no accountability. And so there's a class action lawsuit going on against Pitt and the Make It Right Foundation, citing, quote, significant mental distress and, quote, financial loss. And noting in their petition that despite months and or years of multiple requests, the defendants have failed to, quote, make it right. And what's possibly most troubling, I mean, outside of the fact that people were getting sick and things, is you were literally taking people who had become homeless because of a hurricane, predominantly black residents of New Orleans, and you were promising them a new home. You were promising people, some of them had never actually been homeowners. You were promising them a place to live that they could call their own, that they would be able to feel safe in, despite the fact that the government had basically said, we don't give a flying fuck about you. Here was finally, oh my gosh, somebody cares, and they're going to make it right, and we get a home. And then as soon as, you know, the storm passes and the floodwaters recede, you realize I'm living in a fucking, like, it would be better to live in a tent. There's black mold. There's rot. Shit, like stairwells are falling apart and down. And so like that is possibly like the most egregious part of this whole thing. And again, I bring it up for a few reasons. One, just because I think it's an important thing to highlight, but also because this is so often the case, I feel, with this celebrity bullshit. Celebrities do this kind of stuff to, you know, to make themselves look good. And I'm not trying to throw shade on Brad Pitt. I don't actually know him. I don't know if he's a good person deep down. I don't really give a shit. But he has also not commented on this class action lawsuit, which he could, and he could easily pay for these repairs and not notice like a knock on his bottom line. So I know that about him. And I just feel like it's so indicative of the celebrity capitalist culture to throw this kind of thing at people who are desperate and who are really grinding in the wheels and in the gears of capitalism and, you know, the shock doctrine, like Naomi Klein called it. And then walk away, and then you get to say, I'm this philanthropist, I'm an activist, I'm a whatever the fuck. And meanwhile, the people on the ground have experienced no change in the lived experiences under capitalism.
Yeah, and I mean, there's kind of two scenarios, and we don't really know which it is. One is that Brad Pitt just didn't really give a shit about this and just thought, oh, this will make me look good. And kind of, he's like, oh, I'll donate a little money. I'll put my face on it, and then I'll be the hero that saved New Orleans, and I'll move on with my life. And so he did that, and then didn't give a shit afterwards, and didn't care that people were like, this is fucked up. Another version, you know, that could be possible is that he thought, I'm working with good people who are going to do this right, and I will donate, you know, money and time and some time and my face and my publicity, and then they will handle this. And it turns out they were all, you know, scam artists or worse. And so he's kind of not to blame for the fact that it fell apart, but like you said, what you can say without a doubt is that he's to blame for right now. He could do a very public, if it's not his doing, he could be very public about how this is fucked up and how they need to fix it and how he and the people that were given these houses have been wronged, and he's not doing that. So I think either of those scenarios, you still have him to blame for the aftermath right now, where he could be a very public face on solving this problem. But to get at the deeper problem, and you did really, but I'm just maybe just rephrasing some of what you said, but is that this is the only reason there's an opening for this is, one, our obsession with celebrity culture, but two is you have a federal government that is not really about helping people, is not really about dealing with climate change, dealing with the ramifications of these massive disasters. And so you end up with a void where people's lives are destroyed and the government isn't helping at all. And who's going to help? And so you end up with this place where, well, if we could build a couple of houses and get a celebrity tacked on, then maybe we can solve some of this. And it becomes just this fucking, hodgepodge of duct tape and chewing gum to try and, hold together communities and cities and towns that are getting destroyed in a late-stage capitalism waning empire. You would not even have an opening for Brad Pitt to do this if your government actually cared for these people and was addressing these issues.
Yeah, and it reminds me of Jeff Bezos donated a shit ton to the DC library, and why should the DC
30 seconds of his
right
income.
Exactly, it would be like me putting down a penny.
Yeah.
But why should libraries be in the position that they need Jeff Bezos to donate to them? Right. Every time that California is on fire, which is, I don't know, constantly, there's some celebrity that's like, I'm going to donate to stop the fires in California. And everyone's like, oh my God. You're like, why the fuck? In the richest country in the world, where we have, $760 million a day we spend on policing and prisons. We spend, $1 trillion a year on the war machine. But, I'm sorry, we just can't find enough money for, to stop wildfires in the richest state in the country as well. So
the fifth richest, if it were a country, it's the fifth richest country in the world. California.
Yeah. Which is why a lot of people in California have been pushing for the secession, which is an interesting movement.
Because California may just sink into the ocean. So
Arizona Bay, dude, as Bill Hicks said. But yeah, so it's absolutely ludicrous that celebrities are put into the spotlight for saving the day when the government should really be not really even saving the day. They should be making sure that these things don't happen, because of course Katrina wouldn't have been as nearly as devastating if they'd fucking fixed the levees on any kind of logical basis. So
yeah, and we've gone into all the causes of Katrina, where people like to think, or I guess they've really been told, I don't know, like to think, but they've been told that, it was just a natural disaster, no one could have done anything. Oh well. But what they won't tell you is that it had been predicted by very established climate scientists that had shown in computer modeling that this was going to happen. Mm-hmm. The hurricane highway that was built that basically allowed the floodwaters to do what they did was built by the Army Corps of Engineers along with others to basically allow for oil drilling. And then the oil companies gutted the mangrove swamp that slows hurricanes. So you have 3 or 4 different levels of it was a man-made disaster.
Absolutely, 100%. So moving on, I want to shift gears here, because this is something we've actually covered several times. The misconception of the rise in the crime rate and why we need more police out in the streets. And
we need a few more police. I've noticed there aren't many. Whenever I need a person of color to be beaten, I haven't been able to find a cop. So.
Isn't that just the worst?
Yeah.
So Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, which you can also find at radindymedia.com, does a lot of rad reporting, basically taking bits from NBC or CNN or Fox, or taking articles from the New York Times and Washington Post and things like that, and showing that they're bullshit and they're highly skewed, and they're basically written to support the status quo, in this case the police state. And this was an article that basically takes to task a New York Times piece that is titled "Examining the Spike in Murders," which is basically calling for more police.
Right.
In really not even thinly veiled language. It's basically, one of the things that the author Lopez writes in this New York Times article is, quote, "The fallout from the 2020 racial justice protests and riots could have contributed to the murder spike. Police officers, scared of being caught in the next viral video, may have pulled back on proactive anti-violence practices."
Uh-huh.
Okay, so just in
Right.
those two sentences right
Right.
there, I've got a lot of problems. First of all, it's a gross generalization. And, cities like New York and LA, for instance, did not have a spike in murders following the protests in 2020, which is really what this writer is trying to say, is that these protests are why there's a spike in murders. This is why we need more cops, as opposed to the push to defund police. The argument could very powerfully be made, and I feel like it should be made, that the late stage capitalism, the lived experiences of those during the pandemic, the lack of food, the lack of housing, the lack of any sort of safety net, is really why you see a spike in any kind of crime, whether that be theft or, violent crime like murder. And it has fuck all to do with people demanding human rights. And there's totally going to butcher his name, and I'm sorry. Alec Caracata. No.
Nailed it.
I got it. It's like when you're learning how to read and they're like, just break up the word. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Karakatsinus.
Katsinus. Okay. I apologize, Alec. I'm really sorry. I doubt you're listening to this, but if you are, my apologies. I'm not trying to fuck that up. If it makes you feel any better, I myself have been called Elmer Garfield, so I kind of feel your pain.
Which is a beautiful name.
Thank you. So Alec pointed out that this analysis that's presented as like, oh my God, a murder spike is really, really highly disputed and requires a severe twisting of the data. And basically, it's what we call wrong. And Alec had actually pointed out in this Twitter thread that they wrote out that this is something that he'd already pointed out to the New York Times before, because this is not the first time that the New York Times has been like, oh my God, we need more cops. So this is like the sequel to something that the New York Times had already put out about the need for more police.
Well, now I kind of want to. I know you have to dig into the data. I'm kind of wondering how exactly they twist the numbers.
The other thing that I wanted to point out too is that it's absolute bullshit to suggest that protests against police brutality are why we need more police. Like, that's hilarious.
Well, and not just so New York was one of the few cities that actually did have some defunding of police, but not that much. They claimed it was $1 billion, but in fact, most of that, or over half of that, was reallocated from other areas. So it was not $1 billion. But beyond that, a lot of these cities are claiming, oh, we're having a spike in crime because defund the police. And it's like almost all cities didn't defund the police at all. So the idea that that's causing crime is like laughable.
Yeah. And, it also, of course, suggests that what we really need to be going after are the people who are protesting for basic human rights, not the people violating them, i.e. the cops. And of course, the other thing that Lopez is suggesting here is that police officers who are scared of being caught in the next viral video have pulled back on proactive anti-violence practices. So what you're suggesting is that cops can't properly do policing without being brutal, because then they'll be caught on camera being brutal, and that will, be the next viral video. And it's like, well, how about you just not be a fascist? And also, how is that anti-violence practice by being brutal? Like, the whole thing is just,
Well, and then the part of that sentence you haven't even gotten into yet is the idea of proactive against anti-violence, anti-murder. Well, what exactly would be proactive to stop a murder? You're just going to go around, arrest people that, are on the corner because you caught them spray painting? Does that stop murders? Like, if you're not going to get into mental health and maybe into, gun violence and certain things like that, then the idea that you can just if we arrested everyone who went over the speed limit, then I bet we wouldn't have any murderers out there. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So yeah, there's so many issues with this kind of reporting, and the fair.org points out that this theory is oftentimes called the Ferguson effect, and this hinges on a lot of could-haves, may-haves, and possiblies, which is extremely popular among police chiefs and others. And you'll notice that this line, the fallout from the 2020 racial justice protests and riots could have contributed to the murder spike. It's like, well, I could have I could have spread wings and fucking flown over the Capitol and knocked over the little statue that's sitting up there, but I didn't. Like, all of this that's not fucking reporting. Could have is the shit that you talk about over a beer with a friend, but could have is not fucking journalism.
And hilariously, so the New York Times and Fox News, guess what? Agree on this. Isn't that interesting? Let's have a discussion about why it is that the New York Times and Fox News agree on garbage reporting like this. It could be because they're both pro-cop. Right. And so people want to, Fox News just runs with this like it's a fact now. Like, you'll see segments on Fox News where they're just like, we all know about the spike in crime due to the defund the police movement, but did you also know? Like, they just assume it's true now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and another thing that the New York Times tries to do is, point out that the only way to solve this, the rise in murders, the rise in crime, is to have more policing. And Lopez writes, quote, there's solid evidence for policing, specifically more focused policing, targeting the people in places most likely to be violent, end quote.
Yeah, they already did that. It was called Stop and Frisk. I think They already tried it. It didn't do shit.
And basically what he's saying is that, like, I think that we can make a case for the continued racist, oppressive policing system that we have. Not only that, but amping it up. I think that there's good cause to think that that's the only way to solve this. This is the solution. And of course, he quotes like these quote unquote experts, which, as Alec points out in his Twitter thread, who the fuck are these experts? And this is another common trope, is just quote a bunch of fucking experts that say we need more cops, don't get rid of things like stop and frisk. Also, other racist tropes like, statistically speaking, black people are more likely to be violent than white people, which is, of course, complete bullshit. But that's why we need more cops in those neighborhoods. Well,
it's hilarious because it's during a time when they're saying, like, New York Times and all the mainstream media is saying, like, Joe Rogan doesn't count. You can't let Joe Rogan speak because he's not an expert. But here's our expert. He says black people commit a lot of crime.
Right. And apparently this author, Lopez, has a history of this. He also wrote an article for Vox back in 1921. I wish. In 2021 called Murders Are Spiking, Police Should Be Part of the Solution. And Fair points out that that the problem with Lopez's argument in the piece is that he used evidence about overall reductions in crime to make arguments about homicide, when in fact the two don't move in tandem. Indeed, overall crime rates have gone down during the pandemic, as Lopez has elsewhere acknowledged. And so again, like, the twisting of facts to support your thesis, which is basically that we need more cops, when, particularly in New York, if anybody saw the fucking parades that went off after that NYPD officer was killed. I mean, we do not.
The police funeral that had whatever tens of thousands of cops in it.
Right. It would literally look like, pictures from Berlin in 1939. It's fucking terrifying. The answer is never more cops, and there has been extensive research to promote this understanding that more cops do not lead to reduction in crime. In fact, more cops lead to more crime.
And Stop and Frisk was that. It was one of the largest police forces in the world, arresting or trying to arrest more people, grabbing more people. It was exactly what they're talking about. And it was garbage. It was completely racist. And it did not decrease crime. Decreases in crime were caused by people getting better jobs and being treated better, not by just grabbing every black person on the street.
Yeah. And as Fair points out, even New York Times has also had, op-eds that point out that more police are not the answer. But, let's not all just assume that the New York Times is where we should go for these answers. Obviously, it's not. But even the New York Times has pointed out the realities of having more police out there, which is more crime and more brutality and more violence. So, wrapping up here, I just wanted to give folks a bit of an update on the Mountain Valley Pipeline. If folks have listened to the show before, then you'll know that the Mountain Valley Pipeline is a pipeline that's proposed, a fracked gas pipeline that's proposed to go through parts of Virginia, West Virginia, and North Carolina, and it's fucking atrocious. People have been fighting it for quite some time, and just recently there have been two really big and important and badass developments. One has been that the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals has twice affirmed what folks have been saying for years, that federal agencies too hastily rubber-stamped permits that allowed MVP to rip through the mountains with disregard for endangered species and the delicate ecosystem of Appalachia, which, by the way, is the second most biodiverse area in the world behind the Amazon. And this ruling could actually be catastrophic for the pipeline because it's already more than 4 years behind schedule and billions of dollars in debt. And I'd like to point out that is not because there's just been a shortage of construction materials. Mm-hmm. It is 100% because people have stood literally and figuratively in the way of the construction of this pipeline.
Yeah.
And so the fact that they're so behind schedule and so in debt is so incredibly powerful and really indicative of the powerful stand that people have been taking against the pipeline. Another update happened on February 3rd. The Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals declared the biological opinion issued by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service invalid. The court stated that the agency failed to accurately assess the threat that MVP poses to endangered species, including the Roanoke log perch and the candy darter, which I don't know what those are.
Amazing.
But I want one. I want a candy darter. What the fuck is that? That sounds awesome.
I'm picturing a duck-billed platypus that can climb trees and spits fire.
I'm so into it.
And peas Skittles.
Taste the rainbow. So this and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife's opinion that said that these animals were not at risk is key to the water crossing permit that the MVP needs in order to basically destroy these water crossings. So this is another huge decision. And then in late January, the same court determined that the U.S. Forest Service didn't do their due diligence when giving MVP approval to construct the pipeline through Jefferson National Forest. And I shared that information, that update, as well on the Project Censored radio show last week. So these are huge updates. And again, they're not because our system finally said, oh, wow, this is atrocious. We need to stop these pipelines. It is because of the tireless work of activists, both in terms of battling in court and on the ground. This is really, really powerful news. And I think it also shows once again that these agencies that are supposed to be tasked with protecting these ecosystems, like the U.S. Forest Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, are fucking bought and paid for, because they're the ones that rubber stamped these projects in the first place, and it's taking class action, or not class action lawsuits, but lawsuits to really highlight that they did this inappropriately. And so huge congrats to all of the folks who have been fighting this, Appalachians Against Pipelines, and of course huge congrats to the folks who are on the ground still fighting it. And if y'all want to hear more, just check out Appalachians Against Pipelines on social media.
And it goes without saying that we have to stop fossil fuels immediately if we want to survive going forward. So, you know, I'm pro survival. I think it's all right. It's not bad. Sometimes I get like a brownie. It's pretty good. When I'm eating a brownie, I'm thinking survival, existence. I'm pro.
Not bad.
Pro. So, a couple of quick notes. Eleanor's vinyl album is available. If you like the opening song here and her other work, check it out. It's at artkillingapathy.com. You'll get a signed, limited edition vinyl copy of her new EP. It's awesome. Also, if you want to see this show keep going, please go to liberapay.com/LeeCamp and become a member. We have no ads. We have no corporate sponsors. It's all up to you. Liberapay, that's liberapay.com/LeeCamp. RadIndieMedia.com is our independent media resource that we created, and you'll notice there's also no ads or anything over there. It's just meant for you guys to find great media and great independent outlets. That's RadIndieMedia.com, and all of my stuff's at LeeCamp.com as well.
And on that note, everyone, stay safe out there. Until next time, act out.
Keep fighting.